I'm here with Jed Shepherd, writer of Host and Dashcam, producer, Blumhouse. The list goes on. Just wanted to say, Jed, thank you so much for joining us. It really is appreciated.
I'm always happy to be on a UK podcast.
I've gone right back through your kind of catalogue, and
Uh-oh.
what what I found really interesting was the kind of the collaborators and the return collaborators from all the way from Dawn of the Deaf right through to Dashcam and beyond.
Yeah.
I could go through the list of people: James Swanson, Rob Savage, Gemma Hurley. How did that group develop? I imagine naturally, organically, but how did that group kind of keep working with each other?
So I guess the first person out of all of this entire group I met was Rob Savage. Um, I when I first joined Twitter, I don't know if you remember when Twitter
Mhm.
first happened, but you're just looking out for people who are into the same stuff as you, especially like in
Yes.
the UK. And actually, I remember back in the early days, you could actually hyper focus it so you're only seeing people in your own area. I think that's right. You
Mm,
can see people talking like almost in like a square radius, and I think my thing was set up for that. So most of the things I was getting was from people who were in London, and just up popped a tweet. I think it got like literally two likes and one retweet. It was from a guy called Rob Savage. He'd submitted a 30-second or a 1 minute comedy short to something, and he just posted it online. And it had been online for like, I don't know how it appeared on my timeline, but it's been up for a couple of days. And yeah, it didn't have much traction. And I saw that and I was like, this comedy short's like really cool. And I always think comedy and horror are very close to each other because it's all about
yes.
timing. And so I just do what I always do with everything. I just reached out to him and was like, hey man, really good short. And I was like, have you ever thought about doing horror? And he was like, actually, horror's my passion. I was like, cool. Well, it seems like we're in the same area. Let's hang out. So
Wow.
we met up and we in the very, very, very first meeting. In fact, it might have even been the first sentence I ever said to him was just like, hey, I've got this idea for a film called Dawn of the Deaf, which we ultimately went on to make a couple of years later. But basically just finding my first actual collaborator, someone who understands my references, understands like everything I'm into, was really empowering, and same for Rob. And because he hadn't really done much like horror stuff and he really wants to get into horror, so like us finding each other I think was really, really important in the genesis of everything that came after. And the very, 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 very first thing we did, um that anyone's seen at least, was a short called Absence. We made it for £300, um, of my money, I will say £300, and
It's not been paid back.
I've not received that money back yet. No, but £300 of my money equals about 30 grand of people's time and the
Mm.
effort, and it would be impossible to get that team back together now, really. Um, but all the people who worked in that, the crew, like the costume person, the VFX person, the producer, Rob, those are the people from that very, very first short that we've worked on for everything. Like, when people say, hey, work on this little short with me, I promise you, if I ever make it big or ever make a feature, I'll take you with me. And no
And
one
they don't,
ever like
yeah, they
actually
don't do that.
follows
Yeah.
through, but we do. And like,
Yeah.
it's very important to make sure that we took everyone with us. So we've, as much as we physically can, we take as many people who've helped us along the years with us on every project. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to like do what we're doing now, because they helped us right at the start when we didn't have any money or resources.
And it's a mutually beneficial thing, isn't it? Because obviously, from an outside perspective, who just knows the names and the things that these people have been attached to, so talented, so inspiring each other, giving each other ideas, you must feel like you say you've made it happen through reaching out and talking and communicating and connecting with people. But actually, you know, it's just the sort of the fate of the gods how talented those people actually end up being, and they all are really super
Yeah.
talented people.
Well, I think
Including
we
yourself,
are.
obviously.
Thank you, man. I think it is, part of it is like fate and luck, but part of it is I think you know who's good. Like when you work with someone once, you know who's good,
Mm.
and I guess some of the people who really like didn't show themselves up to be uh as good as the others, like maybe they didn't come onto the next
Yeah.
project
Sort of
potentially. So
naturally, yeah, just naturally kind of faded out of from doing it
yeah,
just through maybe their passion or whatever, that they might be into something else. Yeah, I get that.
exactly.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
always I think that the most fun thing is just to make stuff with your mates. So if you
Mm.
like organically become friends with these people, then they're the first choice when it comes to, like, for instance, my costume lady, Alexi, she has been with us from the very start, and like everything I ever do, like Alexi's on it. Um and I don't even have to think. Like I just did something for like a really big streamer, and I was just like, okay, Alexi's on it. Like I didn't even have to
Yeah,
think, and just having that default away from Rob, I have a very specific like view of how things should be, and especially with costumes, like and like with Alexi, I don't need to tell her; she
yeah.
already
It's like a
knows
shorthand. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, collaborators and everybody that you work with, it must feel just a kind of nice, warm feeling to, like you say, to have all those people still involved in things now.
It really is, and I
Mm,
think loyalty is a commodity that is often overlooked or forgotten about. And
sure.
like I'm extremely loyal, maybe to a fault. So like, you know, I would rather just work with my friends. Maybe some of my friends may not be, um, you know, an expert in certain areas, but I'd rather have them around than not. And
Yeah.
because when the chips are down and you need someone to like work double hard for you, like
Yes.
your friends would, rather than someone you're paying more for. But I just feel very, very lucky that I can get to do it and get to work with a bunch of mates on cool stuff.
Yeah, well, it sounds. I mean, that kind of goes into my next question, really. Host. The third time watching it, I got a kind of strange kind of lockdown COVID nostalgia, which I wasn't expecting to feel. So, did you know that you were capturing a moment, and were you actually seeing it as an opportunity to sort of document what was happening? What was the thought behind that?
You may know like some of the story, but like we had no plans to make this going into COVID. Um, it was only because we were bored. Rob did this. He called me up one day and said he wants to prank our friends on Zoom, and he showed me what he wanted to do, which was to uh, pretend that he fell off a ladder and died, or live on Zoom, because something jumped out of the attic at him. And so he showed me it, and I was like, "That's not going to work. This is terrible. No one's going to believe it." But of course, like everyone believed it, and we luckily I recorded it actually, and I think it was at the last minute. I was just like, "Rob, shall I record this?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So I recorded it on Zoom, and then sent him the footage, and he edited it together into a 2 minute prank video, posted it online, and like within a couple of days, it got 18 million views, and we were like,
Wow.
"Wow, this is crazy! What was going on?" And then we got all these offers from everywhere, but to make it into something bigger. Um, but we didn't have a film. And then Rob called me because don't forget, we weren't allowed to be anywhere near each other. So he called me. He was like, "Okay, everyone's wants something. Do you have any ideas?" And I'm just like, "I no. Like, what is this? What's going on?" And but then at 4:30 in the morning that night, because I was thinking about it all day and all night. I hadn't gone to sleep yet. About 4:30, it just came to me, and I messaged him Zoom seance. Literally those two words, just
Wow.
Zoom seance. And then I went to sleep, and like I woke up like about 5 hours later, and Rob was going crazy for it. He was like, "Yeah." So
He's on it.
that's what was pitched around, and Shudder were the only ones who. I mean, a lot of people wanted it, to be quite honest, but
Mm.
Shudder were the only ones who were like, "Yeah, we'll give you the money to make it within the lockdown," because everyone else was like, "Yeah, we'll give you the money after the
Yeah.
lockdown. You can make this into a big film." But we were like, "No, we want to do it now. We want to do it before we're allowed outside."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Because you get people like me then watching at home who are kind of I can't remember one wave of the of the whole
Yeah,
thing, and going like, oh, this feels so real. This feels right now. So yeah, you want to capture
that's what
that.
it was.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that I think what you were saying, like we didn't expect anything out of it. We were just making it with our literally our friends. You've obviously seen a whole bunch of those people in previous things we've done. It's
Hmm.
just a WhatsApp group we had called the Quarantine Movie Club, which we were just using to like plan movie
Wow.
watches together. And then we just every single person from behind the camera and in front of the camera is in that WhatsApp group. Everyone.
Right.
So it's yeah, we just use our friends and
That's
that's what
so
happens.
that's so amazing. I love that. That's just kind of because I'd imagine most people can identify with that to a certain degree, whether they were doing quizzes at home. It's lovely to think it just happens so naturally, just because it just sparks off in that direction. And I think the
Yeah.
limitations. That's what I was going to ask you next. When I used to teach writing, we used to do these writing exercises called Aleppo, where you have to
Mm.
leave out certain things or put certain things in or use this many adjectives. And the students would come up with these amazing pieces of writing written to the
Hmm.
limitations. So I was thinking the small spaces, the economy of effects, Zoom.
Hmm.
When you were writing, did that help you shape the story, what you couldn't do more than what you could do?
No, I think you're right. The limitations, which were obviously they were limitations by law, really. Like we weren't
Mm,
allowed to do certain things, even if we wanted to. So we
yes.
knew we couldn't be in anyone's house. We knew we anything we do, the cast would have to do themselves, would have to set things up themselves. They'd have to do their own makeup. They'd have to be their own cinematographers. They'd have to do their own sound. They'd have to upload, they'd be their own DIT, send us the footage and the sound later on that day. Um, so yeah, we were very limited to that, and also we had the time was ticking. We had 12 weeks from the time I said Zoom seance to the day we decided it was going to be released on Shudder, which was the day before Boris said the door that we could leave our houses.
So a lot of
Um,
pressure as well then
yeah,
to get
exactly.
it done.
And you could only really do this with a friendship group who's up for doing it. And like,
Mm.
me and Rob and our producer Doug, we've built like an amazing team over the years. So they were all up for doing stuff. But it's funny because we didn't know what host would become, and the whole time we were doing it, I don't think anyone thought or knew what it would be. And we were still watching films every evening. Like after they would film for the day, we would just jump on it and watch a film and talk about the films and stuff. And then we would have like quizzes. We were doing quizzes all the time and playing games like online with each other. We really got into Mario Kart the whole time.
So you're just
Um,
getting, like everybody else, just getting through what was
yeah,
happening, kind of, yeah, an element of entertaining yourselves, but also, I guess that's the way we help each other with our mental health, isn't it? Just by
mhm,
being being present and kind of making each other laugh and goofing around.
yeah,
And the byproduct of that is an amazing movie, which I feel like it's one of those movies that people will return to, especially the further away we get from COVID.
yeah.
If that kind of makes sense as a little time capsule.
It does because like I mean, obviously we thought, okay, maybe this will just work within the quarantine. Maybe it's not going to work outside, but I think as time goes on, more and more people love it and discover it, and it's every list that comes out of like best horror movies, best British horror movies,
Mm.
scariest movie, we're always at the top or there or thereabouts, and
Yeah, that's
but it
amazing.
just blows my mind because like I'm just a massive horror fan, and I'm a horror film fan before I'm a filmmaker. I like
Yeah,
if I could not make another film again but still watch horror movies, I'd pick that. I'd always pick watching horror movies over making horror movies
yeah,
because I love horror movies. So just the fact we're up there with like The Shining and The Exorcist, and sometimes beating them, it just blows my mind. I'm just like,
yeah. It
I
must
don't
be amazing to
understand.
open a magazine and see your movie on there. Because
Oh, there was a time we were like 3 months running. We had features in Empire magazine, and that blows my mind as well.
yeah, being a kid and collecting them and having them in a binder like I used to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Oh
don't
yeah.
watch a lot of modern horror, so
Hmm.
to have kind of come across Host had did kind of open up my sort of willingness to watch more modern films. So then I watched Saint Maud and a few others, and I was just
Oh,
like,
great film. Have you
wow,
seen
yeah,
Spencer?
yes, yeah. I
Another
saw
great British horror film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense to ask you a little bit about Dashcam, because that feels like
Hmm.
the sort of the height of COVID mania, because it's a
Yeah.
very different film, isn't it?
Very. Yeah.
And I'm really interested in the character of Annie in terms of writing that character or molding that character. It felt to me a little bit like, this is a really strange comparison, but like in professional wrestling, where they say that it's the successful characters are your own character amped up times by 100. I'm really interested in the development of that character, because
Hmm.
Annie is hard to get on with as a character, me
Hmm.
personally, but
Yeah.
as I didn't take my eyes off her for the whole film, so it worked. A
Oh,
very, very different film to host.
it is. It's like the opposite of Host. But
Mm,
after Host, me and Rob, we just wanted to do something was completely different.
yeah,
Host is like universally loved, and it's like a gateway horror for a lot of people. When kids were watching it, it made our names, but we were just like, okay, horror's meant to be dangerous. Horror isn't meant to be safe.
yeah,
We wanted to do something different and dangerous, and so we had this idea for a long time. So I've known Annie for 10 years,
right.
maybe longer. And like like stayed with her. Like she was in a band called Giant Drag, and I was a fan of that band. And so, I would talk about Annie to Rob a whole bunch of times, and I showed him a whole bunch of some videos that she made. She literally does really drive around LA doing that show where she raps and stuff. She really does it. I've been on her show as well, and I think it was 2017. I will, yeah, 2017. I just come back from Sundance. I stayed with Annie before Sundance and then after Sundance, and she was just doing what she calls band car, and I was beside her doing the beats, kind of like the character. It's kind
Right.
of in sorry, the it's called Stretch in
Stretch. Yeah, yeah.
Dashcam, but his real name's Amma. Um, I was kind of like that character. So I was like, hey, this is really cool. This would be a really cool film. I don't know what kind of film, but obviously a horror film. So as soon as I came back from LA, I said to Rob, we should make this into a movie. And we played around with that idea a lot. That he was like, okay, what kind of movie? I was like, what if she is like an Uber driver or something, and her passenger is possessed? That's kind of all we had.
Yeah.
And then um and then we built it out a little bit more, and before Host came out, we'd pitched that around. I think we even pitched it to Blumhouse, and they said no. But obviously after Host, things changed. People's minds changed. People were just
Yeah.
like, okay, let's just give these guys whatever they want.
Yeah. They know what they're
Um,
doing.
yeah, so I don't think that movie would have been made if it wasn't for Host. Definitely not, in fact. And um, it is the type of movie where, we already knew that there's going to be a lot of Americans who would hate it because it's holding up a mirror to American
Mm.
society and what the rest of the world thinks of America. So we already knew what it would be like. But in Europe and over here, like everyone loved it.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some Americans who didn't like how we represented Americans and the kind of stuff that Annie did as well. But um,
I think
but
I
you know,
got it
it's
more when I watched the credits and I saw
yeah,
her just naturally rapping the credits or freestyling the credits and the people in them. And I was like,
yeah,
oh, okay. So this is just something that she does all the time.
yeah.
um,
Um, like I remember I was like,
because you got a shout out, didn't you?
so I was like, Annie, are you gonna say something nice about me in your rap? And she was like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then when I watched it for the first time, I'm just like, Annie, Annie, what
Yeah.
did you do?
Thanks. Because
Um,
the other part that I thought was really, it's a wild film, and
oh yeah,
um,
it's crazy.
that was the comments on the screen. I know they were written by a range of different people, but I
Hmm.
imagine you had to curate those and time it perfectly for what was happening and what was going on. That was really interesting because it's a completely different way. There's some similarities to Host in that sense, of kind of utilizing what you've got to hand in sort of technology, what's a natural
Yeah,
thing. But I found that really interesting because some of the comments would come up, and like you say, that the comments actually hold a mirror up to the society as well, and of online, people, how people behave online. Might see something horrific and just be like, "lol." I found that really
exactly.
interesting.
And Annie's comments are like that as well.
Mm,
A lot of them were based on Annie's comments, and like I would say, the vast majority of those comments were the Rob and the producer showing the footage to real people and getting them to react in real time about what they would say. Yeah, so obviously there we made sure we put the exposition of what's going on. So you actually, if you read the comments, there is
mm.
the wider story explained within those comments. But obviously the vast majority of it is just like people trolling, people
Yes.
fighting each other in the comments, which is what you get in a real live stream.
Yeah, sadly, that is very realistic, and
Yeah.
again, it takes you into it in the way that using Zoom takes you into it, because these are things you see. These are taking the familiar and making it strange. I like the parts where it dropped out and then had to reconnect, and there were always at really key moments so that people wouldn't be seeing certain
Yeah.
elements of it. So they're also playing a bit of a guessing game.
We couldn't think of it because me, Robin, and Gemma Hurley, the other writer, we just couldn't think of a way where someone wouldn't call the police or the army or somebody
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
it's the UK. Like this is mostly
yeah.
set in Kent, and we even though it's meant to be London, I guess, but we filmed it in Kent. People would call the police immediately if
Oh,
something
yeah.
crazy happened. So we always had to
100%.
kind of hide it from the audience a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense now you've explained it, because I was just thinking a couple of weeks ago I saw like a articulated lorry back into a telegraph pole, and it started to
Oh
fall and
God.
everyone was skidding around it, and I was straight on the phone. Excuse me, I don't want to bother anybody, but
Well, we do, yeah.
yeah, we'll report it.
Yeah. Let someone else sort it out. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've handled that in a very deft way, I think,
Mhm.
to kind of avoid that. My next question really was, you have this role where you mentioned Blumhouse and executive producing and writing. Are you able to kind of reflect on that success? Is there a part of the role or the roles that you have that you enjoy the most?
Doing Blumhouse stuff is obviously great.
Hmm.
Um, but I actually still don't think I've achieved anything. I really don't because like we in the UK it's just really hard. There's not too many people that I can look to for you know, advice or the path to take. But
Hmm.
like my aspirations are like much higher. There's so much stuff I want to do. One of the things I want to do is rebuild horror in the UK because we were the
Awesome.
kings of it in the 60s and the
Yeah.
70s, and then we let the rest of the world catch up to us.
I love Amicus, all the Amicus
Love
anthologies.
Amicus. Yeah.
And they're a good way of kind of being quite economic with the budget, breaking stories
Casting.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, and Hammer, like you say, led the world, and you've got all these amazing things. So that, yeah, I'm sure, this will be something that I'll be able to reflect back on this interview and go, yeah, we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wait a couple of months. There's an announcement coming in a couple of months, and that is it's going to be quite a big achievement for me. So yeah, so maybe at that point when that's announced, I'll think, oh, okay, cool. I've done something bigger than anything I've done so far. And one of the most exciting things to do is helping other British filmmakers get to a stage where they can make stuff. So I'm in the UK currently, I'm one of the people that production companies, studios go to when they want help with horror films now, which is it's a really cool position to be in because I can
Hmm.
kind of shape what British horror becomes over the next few years. And in my mind, the big mistake that we've been making and for the last 30 years is we keep making arty horror movies. When we get to make horror movies, they're just arty, they're not commercial. So
Hmm.
nobody sees it. It doesn't make a profit. It's not reinvested back into the British film industry. Um, so my whole thing is let's make commercial movies. You don't have to make expensive commercial movies, but let's make movies other countries want to see. Let's make movies that
Yes.
Americans want to see because then we'll, get some money back into the system so we can make more and more and more movies. And when we were the kings of horror back in the Hammer and Amicus days, you know, people people were like crawling over broken glass to get to us. We just need to really think about the horror that we're making, make sure the horror isn't so niche. we can we have amazing history. We have thousands of years of history compared to modern history. I mean, compared to
Mm.
hundreds of years of history in America. But they are making these classic horror movies. We could do better.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, because there is a kind of little bit of a, you can see that there's a bit of a groundswell when it comes to folk horror. There's the Ben Wheatley and different things, and even kind of like I would say, Men was a little bit like that as well, like a
yeah.
small village, and you've got these kind of things that I think people are dying to sink their teeth into, and a lot of fans, like a lot of passionate horror fans, is conventions all over the country full of them.
So that's a good example because if you look at Men and you look at like things like Kill List, we can do folk horror really good. But if you look at the
Mm,
folk horror that the Americans are making, look what Ari Aster did with Hereditary. That's
yes,
essentially a folk horror, but he
yeah.
managed to do it in a commercial way, big set pieces, big
Mm.
ending. Here we just don't do that. We need to have these like big horror set pieces in order to, get it around the world. We've been really, brainwashed into thinking this is the type of movie we should make. And I blame the BFI for a lot of that because they only fund dramas, heightened dramas. They're very
Mm.
scared to put their hand in the pocket and fund horror movies.
So, is there a kind of ones that you keep revisiting, or do you do sort of when you're watching in your own time that kind of influence you, or just for fun, really?
I mean, obviously, found footage is kind of my thing. I just watch a lot of found footage films, and there's a lot out there. Post Blair Witch Project, there was
Mm.
just infinite found footage films trying to recapture what the Blair Witch Project did, which none ever have.
Yeah.
But about every 7 to 10 years, a good found footage comes along. So you've got Wreck and Paranormal Activity.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so like I'm still on the search for like good found footage films. Like Lake Mungo is really good as well. And actually, out of Japan, I think, and people sleep on it. They are the most consistent with their found footage. It's always really, really interesting. Koji Shiriashi, that director, he did Norai the Curse. He's been making found footage films. He's made about 35 found footage films in the last 20 years, and they're all pretty good. So,
So people,
yeah,
people kind of need to switch on to that then a bit, because I'm
yeah,
not, yeah, because I remember I watched a documentary at a film festival about is it category 3 or category 4
yeah,
films?
cat free films, yeah.
Cat 3, yeah. And that got me into some really interesting films like Taxi Hunter and different ones
Mhm.
like that. And yeah, you just need somebody to sort of open your eyes to it, don't you? And go, check these out, they're
Yes.
amazing. A bit like with when, it was like Old Boy and Lady Vengeance, and everybody watched them and then moved
Yeah.
on to another thing, and then everybody watched these. It's just like there's so much now. It's really hard for people to point you in those directions, and you can just watch
Yeah.
3 or 4 of these films.
That's why, you got to listen to these horror podcasts where people give recommendations. I used to actually do a podcast which was just horror film recommendations. I haven't done that in years, but that that it was really fun to kind of research.
I need someone to tell me what to watch, or so I just won't. I'll just watch the same things, or I'll stay in my own comfort zone. Telling me to watch something that I haven't watched for say 20 years, I'm rewatching it and going, oh, okay, I saw something completely different. Um,
Totally, yeah.
yeah, like we watched Friday the 13th recently, and in my head, I'm always like, I love 4. I think 10 is just hilarious, and Jason X is just amazing and fun. And I
Hmm.
never really revisit the first one. And
Yeah.
I watched the first one, and I was like, this is actually really good.
Yeah, but I'm a little bit like you. I actually skip the first few. Like
Yeah.
I go straight to the weird ones. I go straight to like
Mm,
4, 5, 6, 7. Like I
yes.
actually love Jason Goes to Hell, which
Really
people hate on
controversial.
that. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you why. It's got, because I just remember the cover of that, like in the video shop, and the
Yes.
fact spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the film's like 35 years old. Like Freddy Krueger comes from hell and drags him down, and that blew my mind as a kid, and it
Yeah.
still does now. Like what?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
team ups weren't really a thing then. You
No,
might get the odd one in a comic, but you weren't kind of getting team ups. The closest we had to team ups was like Creepshow with like Stephen King and George Romero teaming up, but
exactly.
not the
Yeah,
characters. It's not like yeah, it's not
it
like you've
just
got Cujo versus Dawn of the Dead or something.
exactly. Yeah, and the different franchises, different studios. So the fact that they were together just blew my mind. So that's why I love that. I love that. We had to wait for like 15 years till they actually did meet in a film again.
Video shop
Yeah,
moments make a big difference, don't they? Seeing those posters or standees when you're a certain age.
exactly.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
used to be scared to death of films that I hadn't seen, and then didn't go and see them just from that childhood memory. And I think Friday the 13th Part 4 was one of those, just with the knife through the eye. And I was a young kid and I didn't know what it was, a hockey mask. I just thought it was a skull with a thing, and I was like, oh,
Oh, okay.
scared me. I had nightmares. And obviously, watching it as an adult, it's my favorite one. And you've got Crispin Glover dancing, and it's
It is great.
it's
It is
wacky
great.
and brilliant. That's probably my favorite. But I've got a soft spot for Jason X as well. But
Jason X, Jason Goes to Manhattan, Jason
yeah,
Takes Manhattan, wherever it's called.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I love all the kind of later ones.
So do you watch franchises? I certainly do watch them out of order. Certainly when you're a kid, it's just whichever you can find. Or are you kind of very much sequential?
I mean, if I have the time, I'll watch it. If I know I have a whole day, I'll watch like Nightmare on Elm Street 1 to like 4, 1 to 5 or something. I like
Yeah.
doing that. But they're obviously my favorites. I'll jump to 3 first. Then I
Yep,
might
same.
jump to Wes Craven's New Nightmare or something, and just jump around a bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do like having days where I'm just watching every film like in a franchise. I don't do it enough, but yeah, I like doing that just because you pick up more. If you know what's come before, you kind of you get more out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, with going back to Host, I think for me watching it a third time, I was kind of smiling more and kind of going, "Oh yeah, it was like that. That did happen. That's just like it was." And because you automatically go back to what you were doing before,
Yeah,
we kind of all just drifted back. But it was a really strange period of time where very odd things were happening on a daily basis. And then it
totally.
just
Yeah,
stopped. It stopped, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're not going to talk about that anymore. We're not going to deal with it in this way anymore. We're just going to go back to try and remember exactly what we did before and do that," which is really
yeah.
mad, really mad.
And we did do things like we would all just jump on Zoom and just all drink on Zoom as if
Yeah,
we're in a pub or something. I
yes,
find that weird.
yeah. The amount of
Um,
gin that I drank, and I'd never drank gin before lockdown, and I was just
I really,
guzzling gin and watching movies with people, and
I love
just
it.
nodding off. And
Yeah, if it
where
wasn't
did that
for the
come from?
fact, yeah, if it wasn't for the fact like COVID, just these shared times that we have with each other would have been like really special. But obviously, there's bad stuff surrounding it,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
people
yeah.
dying
That's
all over the
it.
world.
It's horrific.
Yeah,
But then again, like you say, there is that kind of, comedy is kind of horror's kind of opposite side, isn't it? It's like the two face of the smiling, laughing face theatre. There is humour in there. There's humour in Host, isn't there? How important was
it's
it for
funny.
you to get especially when the sneeze? I know that was improvised. Can you improvise a sneeze? But it just happens, doesn't it? But yeah, things like that just really tickle me. I think you need that a little bit of awareness. Is it something? Is that your domain? Do you have to get those moments in there? You don't want to
Yeah.
take it too seriously or take yourself too seriously, maybe?
Well, just with found footage, you need to, you have a story that you want to tell, but you have to let the actors kind of feel real and be authentic. And because we were all friends as well, it
Mm,
meant, they were just doing things. The group dynamic is almost true to life. Maybe a couple of people, their dynamic is swapped around a little bit, but like they are just doing what they would normally do on a Zoom call. And I Zoom with these ladies all the time, so it's that's the group dynamic. So just seeing these things naturally happen, letting them like kind of do what they want as long as they get to from point A to point B means that you do get like happy accidents like sneezes, and you find with the found footage film, at least you find it in the editing, like
mm,
because they just shot so much stuff. It's in the edit, like you kind of find the actual film. And Rob and the producer Doug, working with Brenna Rangot, our editor, found the film out of all of the footage that we had. But I personally think if even one of those cast members were different, it would have been a completely different
yeah,
film, and it
yeah,
might not have worked. But that group dynamic, having
yeah,
because like we got Regina, Caroline, and Gemma, they were all in Dawn of the Deaf. and we got them from Central School of Speech and Drama in like 2015,
Right.
16, and we cast them for that. So then we became friends ever since. Uh, Gemma and Gemma and Emma, they were both together in a short that I did. But they all kind of knew each other just through me and Rob and the group. Um, so you
Yeah.
know, if one of those pieces weren't there, it may be completely different. We might not even be talking right now.
And from a viewer's point of view, that kind of the relationships and when somebody's angry at someone and goes, no, it's fine. There's a certain way of saying no, it's fine, where it's not fine, and they're really
Yeah,
pissed off. That is perfectly observed in there. And I think you have to know that person. You have to have some sort of relationship with them to be able to do that,
yeah,
because that's that kind of moment where you are, whether it's in the halls of residence or a house share, or if you're trying to get on, but that person is getting on your last nerve because they always do this thing that you
yeah.
hate.
That's
You be,
shown a couple of times actually with
yeah.
with obviously Gemma and Haley, just
Yes.
this unspoken kind of anger with each other, and then you also get it with Radina and Alan, her boyfriend, just in the
Mm,
house, these looks and this just like
yeah.
sense of frustration.
The defenses go up a little bit. You go into your
Yeah,
little clique, you have a little chat about them. Do we like them, kind of thing.
exactly. And
It,
look, we use, that's her real boyfriend. Um,
wow.
and we even Teddy and Ginny, they were together as well.
Right.
Um, so we just use the real relationships and just that's what we had.
Yeah, and it does it works. It reflects, because I think the hardest thing sometimes with things like that is that it feels like it's being read directly off the page for the first time. It doesn't kind of
That's the death of found footage. If you just read, if someone writes a script and just expects their actors just to say word for word in a found footage film,
mm.
it's the death of it. It doesn't feel natural. It feels like a guy has written the script for six ladies, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, and that's it. The voices are very authentic. So much so that, like, I think with the Teddy character's interesting because he's that male friend in a group of a female friendship group, but
Hmm.
it totally makes sense that he's in there. He is that kind of guy. You couldn't write a Teddy character, I don't
Yeah,
think, word for word and get it as pitch perfect as the way he
and
works with
that's
that
Teddy.
dynamic.
That is Teddy, and like the reason why there's a puppet in it, I know it's creepy, but like he had a puppet in his house.
Right.
That's why there's a puppet in Host.
How
They became like
weird.
very iconic. All those
Yeah.
things you see, they just had in their house. So we integrated everything.
Yeah, well, that's true, because I think, like I say, with found footage and things like that, and you do get a big reaction from people if they don't like it, in a big way. Like, I remember watching Blair Witch Project in the cinema,
Hmm.
and people getting up and booing at the end. Have a real visceral reaction to it, like they were offended by the fact that this camera was moving around, and because it was so different.
Yeah,
And I can't remember many films, or any film really, certainly not in the northwest of England. You don't tend to get many people at the end; they just get up and leave.
I think
Um,
Blair Witch was, it was a unique thing because the hype around it by the time it reached here was
mm,
palpable. It was crazy, and for a film to like be made for almost nothing and to make like how much it made is insane. It's never been repeated. So, and for me, it's the best found footage film. It is the template that we use for a host for sure, and I don't think it could ever be beaten. And I think it's one of the best horror films of all time. And I could completely understand though why people don't like it. I can completely
mm,
understand that because it's unconventional, it's shaky, it makes you sick. But there's something so authentic about it and just beautiful about it. And the fact that it was the first one that people are aware of. Obviously, there was a whole bunch of found footage films
yeah,
before Blair Witch Project, but this is the one where it's why we call it found footage because, and I was speaking to Ed Sanchez about the director of the Blair Witch Project yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, Friday. I was speaking to him,
no way.
and I didn't even realize this, but we call this subgenre found footage because in the very start of the Blair Witch Project, in the title card, it said the footage was found. That's why we
Ah,
call it found footage. I didn't even
right.
realize. It's like, oh
No,
wow,
No,
So it really is because of the Blair Witch Project.
that's blown my mind. Yeah, I hadn't really because
Yeah,
in my mind it was something maybe even predated that. Um, but yeah, I
we
mean, it
had,
does. There are films similar,
yeah,
but not in terms of the name. Sometimes putting a name to it makes it more of a movement or a thing, doesn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, that was a film that kind of put it on the map for a lot of people. So that's why we think that's the first one. But I'm actually going to Burkittsville in 3 days' time, where Blair Witch was shot, to do some stuff over there.
Going back to kind of influencers, and I know we were talking a little bit about kind of found footage and things that you're into yourself.
Hmm.
I don't know how much you can talk about this, but people will probably beat me up if I don't mention it. On your IMDb, currently has untitled Sam Raimi project. So is that something? Obviously, I don't want you to break down page by page whatever it is you're doing.
We actually announced it like properly, like
Oh,
after Host came out. But we haven't ever released anything else about it. So before Host, we signed a deal with Sam Raimi to do a film, and throughout lockdown, me and Rob were on Zoom all the time with Sam and his production company working on this film. So as well as doing Host, at the same time, me and Rob were working on this Raimi project. I am not 100% sure if that specific project is still going to happen,
hmm.
but in the meantime, I've been doing stuff with Sam. So I don't know how much I can say, but I'm doing something later on this year that's coming out later on this year that Sam's been involved with. And
Fantastic.
me and Sam are going to work on a whole bunch of things together as well. That's the plan.
That sounds like it's right in line with what we were discussing earlier on about that kind of revitalizing the British horror through essentially getting those American eyes on it.
Oh yeah, just you were the as a horror fan growing up, as a kid growing up, you have these icons. Like Sam Raimi is my favorite director, so the fact now, like, he's like genuinely literally my mentor, so it just blows
Wow.
my mind. And I've also, getting to speak to like some of the other biggest horror directors of all time as well, speaking to them about potential projects and things. And there's one director who's directed what some people call the scariest movie of all time, not including Host, and I'm going to be working with him on something as well. Um, so yeah, like I'm really trying, but like it feels sometimes like really difficult doing it from the UK because no one's really helping me. I feel like I'm alone in an island, like just like shouting at clouds, trying to get people to like understand what I'm talking about. So I
Yeah.
have to go to America and get these like icons to like be on board with stuff I'm doing in order to make the people who hold the purse strings over here to kind of get them to notice. So that's what
Yeah.
kind of what I'm trying to do.
It's strange, that, isn't it? Like it's kind of like you say, it's gone the complete opposite way from kind of being for want of a better phrase, the host of people and sort of British horror, being the home of horror,
Oh yeah. Well, the problem is because there's no money here or people not
Mm.
willing to invest here, all of our best directors have to leave, have to go to America to make stuff. Look at Ben
Yeah,
Wheatley; he had to go make the Meg too because he's not making money over here.
that is mad. I can't wait
It's
to see
mad.
it. That's it's kind of what I want, but I know what you mean. I
Yeah,
also kind
I
of
think
want to
it's cool.
see his other films. I want to see like what certain British creators do with big franchises or big
Hmm.
blockbuster movies. I kind of want to see that,
I want to see that, but I want to see them do it here. Like
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, I think it's a little bit of a sellout to like leave this country, and
Mm.
I'm very much like I get asked all the time. You should move. Like, when are you going to move to America? You should move to America. It'll help your career. Maybe it will, but like I will feel like a little part of me dies because like I'm British. I want to make
Mm.
stuff here. I want to build up the British film industry, specifically in horror.
All
And we
right,
have the
yeah.
most amazing horror filmmakers here who will never get a chance to make the film that they want to make because there's no opportunities here. So
Yeah.
whatever platform that I've got right now, I'm going to try and get as many people to jump on this bandwagon and help me like build up the infrastructure we need to make horror films here. And if it takes someone making like a new Hammer or a new Amicus, cool. But like I
Mm.
think we could do better than that. I think we can make
Yeah.
a big studio here,
Yeah,
British studio.
because really people
Yeah,
forget they were like cottage industries, weren't they? They were all
yeah,
mainly
they were
in one
small.
one building or one office, and you
Amicus
know,
was in a shed.
yeah,
Amicus was in a shed. Like genuinely, it was like a
yeah,
2 room shed. So you know, you just need people investing. And I'm speaking to the right people, but I just need to get into a place where we all support each other. Because the problem in this country, and you might have doing this podcast, you might have noticed it. All the horror filmmakers you meet, they believe that they're competing against each other because there's
mm,
very few opportunities, and this is the fallacy that people believe, but there isn't. If we all work together, shared resources, all kind of pulled in the same direction, not shooting each other down. Like I see on social media, like horror film people in the UK shooting down other people's horror films in the UK as well. Don't say bad stuff about each other. Let's be
yeah.
united and build each other up and help each other.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
even when it comes to sort of reviewing and looking at new films, um, I know I talk about kind of watching bad films and with friends,
oh, I
but
do all the time. Yeah.
there's a difference there. I think you can tell if it's a labor of love and somebody's done the absolute best they can with the resources they've got. And there's value in every film. Just getting a film made is incredible. So
Hmm.
I think being mindful of that when you're talking to somebody who's made a film, or when you're reviewing it, or when you're discussing it, it is really important, and to kind of, like you say, build each other up. And
Yeah.
it takes so much to do. You know more than I do. Um, so it's funny as well, isn't it? Because if you look at box office and things like that, um,
Hmm.
movies that do well at the cinema now tend to be your Marvel, and other sort of franchises, and then there's Scream will come out and do well, or
Hmm.
a certain horror is there. There is a market for people
It's a
going to
big
the
box
cinema to be
office. Yeah.
scared. Yeah.
It's like the biggest box office hits horror movies and superhero hero movies. Those are the two big things. And over here, the only unless you find private investment somewhere, and usually you don't do horror with that, or so far people haven't made horror with that. You are relying on the funding you get through particular schemes through the BFI, and they don't always want to do horror movies.
Mm.
Like with the BFI, for instance, like they hardly ever invest in horror movies. And if you look on their website, you can see they have a tab where you can see all the horror films, sorry, all the films they've made or funded for the last 30 years. And if you filter it and try and find all of the horror movies, there's a small handful. And then if you look into that small handful, they weren't the ones to fund it. They came in afterwards and gave money once it's fully funded. Like
Right.
they always hold up. And when I talk about this on social media, people will say, "What about his house? His house, is critically acclaimed. It's got the BFI logo at the front. They funded it." No, they didn't. His house came to the BFI, who rejected it. They got the money elsewhere, and then
Right.
the BFI came on for some finishing money once someone else had taken the chance. So it's really misleading, and they hold up things like Saint Maud as well. That wasn't like funded. That wasn't fully funded by the BFI. Nor is anything. They don't take a chance on original horror movies, and I think they are doing our film industry a disservice because they're making two types of movies, which are costume dramas and poverty porn. That's the only things that they release. And who is that for? They're real niche things to win awards. They're just so they get a pat on the back from their peers. Um, they never make a profit. The money's never reinvested back into the British film industry. Other people looking from around the world just think we don't do anything. They have the last 30 odd years, they've destroyed horror and I think in general the British film industry. They have not made movies which I feel are commercial.
Mm.
Um, so they are making movies, or BFI funded movies which are niche, and it's an art fund, but it's an art fund funded by public money. It's funded by the lottery. So I would say it would just make sense. You can make arty movies, but make them commercially minded. Get a
Yeah.
profit, make a profit. Movies that the public actually want to see. Just look at the box office. Go, cool. We'll make a movie like that.
Mm.
Let's make a horror movie. And then the money will go back into investing into more films. Then you can make your arty films that nobody watches but wins the BAFTA. You know, if you look at the list of like films that have won BAFTAs and stuff, they're mostly movies that nobody's ever watched and nobody will watch.
Hmm.
It's just for a group of, rich, to be honest, white people who are
Yeah.
making movies for their friends.
That
And
was going to be my question really. Is it kind of a snobbishness around horror then? It's that kind of it's a class still a class-based system in terms
yes.
of funding and who makes those decisions. Whereas we're talking about diversity sometimes in casting, but
Hmm.
we're looking at a different level there, aren't we? Because horror is already on the back foot anyway, because sometimes it's just prejudged as trash or
Hmm.
easier to make, which is the exact opposite because you have to be
Yeah.
super more creative, especially with practical and digital effects. And oh my word!
Yeah.
So is it just a case of it's a certain level of classist group of people who are really kind of not interested? You don't feel there's a shift in how people look at horror? I feel like more people talk about horror now, but then again, like you're saying, maybe it is the people who hold the purse strings are the ones who are not necessarily listening.
It's complete snobbery.
Mm.
In fact, I know people who have had horror films funded by the BFI, and then at the last minute they said, "Okay, yeah, before we send you this money, can you make it a non-horror? Can you just make it like a heightened drama instead?" And the money was pulled away because that wouldn't happen. I can give names of people, I can give names of films where that's happened to, where the money was promised by the BFI and then pulled away. Throughout lockdown, I spoke to a lot of British filmmakers and I said, "What's the one problem you keep having?" And it's funding and it's
Mm.
applying for these things. Like if you're doing a horror, you just won't get it. And people do find money to make horror here, but there's no investment in it. And like, you need investment. You need to be able to market yourself. You need to. There needs to be some kind of infrastructure so you know what to do with your film once you've made it as well, and how to get it out there, how to get it, how to get a sales agent to distribute it in, or try and get distribution in other countries. You need an infrastructure. You need someone who knows what they're doing at the top, holding the purse strings, who can help you with that. Currently, the
Mm.
BFI film funding scheme is not fit for purpose. It's making movies for their friends. It's making movies that nobody wants to see. Like, have a look at how many movies that they funded have made a profit. None. Zero. Maybe one or two in the last 30 years. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It is negligent. And like we have let our film industry be destroyed, and especially our horror film industry be destroyed by snobs. Like,
Yeah.
give the reins to somebody else who kind of knows what they're doing, who wants to, make a profit. It's a business in the end. Like, we need to make a profit in order to reinvest back into ourselves to make bigger and better movies. And we have probably lost 20 Ari Asters, 50 Jordan Peels in the last 30 years because they haven't been given the opportunity to make their films.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really tragic to hear because you see, whether it's a one-off TV episode or
Hmm.
a short film that somebody sends you, or whether it's a screener or something, and you see something there, and you think this is wonderful, and you know as well that there are thousands, thousands of people in this country who are so invested in horror movies. To be honest, most of them are making podcasts.
Yeah.
The more I get into it, the more I realize we're not the first people to do this. But
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, you teach kids. Ask your kids a question. Name your top five British directors. They won't be able to.
yeah,
They won't be. I can't. I can barely do it. Like
mm,
it's crazy what's happened.
yeah,
Um.
yeah. I'm going
So
on an American podcast coming up, and we're doing my favorite five British films because obviously it's just like he's British, he'll talk about it,
yeah.
and I'm determined. Obviously, Host will be in there.
Oh, thanks,
Um,
man. Appreciate it.
um, and I'm looking back, and I was kind of getting all my British films out, the ones that certainly the ones I have in physical media. And I was looking, I was like, oh, I've got to mention Theatre of Blood, and I've got to mention,
Oh,
but
great.
but
Yeah.
but but part of me is there is a market. People are like interested to see like Hammer and your own films and things like that.
Mhm.
It's a unique selling point to have a
It
British
really
film.
is.
Yeah.
And like, I can't stress enough how many amazing British filmmakers are out there. Like last week, I was just at a horror film festival, and I was judging the shorts with with a bunch of cool people, and there were some amazing films in there. And if these
Mm.
people just got the opportunity and the investment, they would make all timers. But they'll odds are currently, like, those people might never get given this investment. So and if you look in the theater, like 222 right now is blowing people's minds in the London's West
Yes,
End.
it
It's an
is, isn't it?
amazing,
Yeah, it's been sold as like a movie, isn't it? The
yes,
way it looked.
exactly.
Yeah. So
It's great. So,
so do that with
the
a movie.
appetite's there. I'm not sure it would work as a movie. I
No,
really
I
am not
mean
sure.
like the sort of the marketing approach, really, like
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, like throw your weight behind it in the same way. That's a really interesting sort of behind the curtain look at how hard, and I suppose it makes it even more admirable what you guys have managed to do despite those factors that we've just discussed.
It's all American money. That's the thing. Like, the Americans appreciate horror, so they're the ones who give us the money. It's not the UK. It's a real shame. It's
Yeah,
actually devastating what's happened to our film industry, and how many amazing filmmakers will be lost because of the snobbery of a few people.
I'm yeah, you've made might be the first time I am speechless because you've just clarified to me kind of questions that I've kind of had around the British horror and why you get one or two and
Hmm.
you look like you're going in a certain direction and things are really taking off and then it kind of peters out and you think, why, what happened to that person, like watching the movie Let Us
Oh yeah,
Pray. And
yeah.
I just thought, what a great film. And the actors, you might see odd one of them go on to sort of like Game of Thrones or
Hmm.
something, and it's just like that's a really great little snapshot moment. And then a couple of years later, and I'm talking about Host, or I'm talking about St. Maud, or I'm talking, but yeah, there's like you say, there must be thousands of those films that
So yeah,
could be made.
great British films all the time, but they just don't have the market and budget to kind of get it noticed. And um, like, hopefully people who listen to this, they're radicalized enough to, like, actually talk about this, and maybe think and help make solutions of what we can do to, you know, take away the snobs at the top, and get more horror funded, because we have amazing stories over here. We have amazing filmmakers. Let's not lose all of our best filmmakers to time and to America. Let's try and make some cool films here.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. I wish I had the money and the expertise and the skill and all those things to do something. But what I do say is, though, as a viewer, as a fan, thank you for that, and thank you for that passion for what everybody who I know who loves horror really cares about the same things, and things like that. Sometimes I'll just opt out, and I don't know why I opt out, and then Host really got me back in there. And just want to say a big thank you for that. It's a bit like sometimes like Dead Man's Shoes was an example of a film that made me realize, like, this is like essentially watching Scorsese De Niro.
Oh yeah,
This is an
100%.
incredible piece of work that I put up against anything. And that's
Yeah,
a guy from the Midlands, working class background, with great ideas and a great group of friends
amazing, amazing film.
who helped make it happen. And
Hmm.
Host, I would say, gave me that same feeling and that same hope. So hopefully there's somebody listening to this, maybe 15, 16 years old or whatever, and they're just like, right, I'm going to start writing that script. I've got this
Love
great
it.
idea.
I'd love
That
that to happen. Yeah.
yeah, me too, me too. With that in mind, I'm really interested in if you have any kind of recommendations or films or creators that for you want us to kind of check out, people that you're
Yeah.
into, or recent watches, whatever, really.
Yeah. Well, obviously, what some we mentioned before, Prino Bailey Bond's Censor.
Mhm.
I think it's a British film that does something very un-British, and it's good, and it's got a great cast. And I think Prino Bailey Bond is one to watch. If I was gonna throw all my money onto a British filmmaker who's gonna make big waves over the next couple of years, it's Prino Bailey Bond. So I
Right.
would say her. Um, Also, there's a filmmaker, an Irish filmmaker called Kate Dolan. She made a film that is on Netflix right now called You Are Not My Mother.
Oh yes,
I don't know if you've seen that, but
I've not
that's a
seen it. I'm
great
aware of
movie.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I first encountered Kate when we were doing the short film circuit, and she had a short film there called Cat Calls, And I remember me and Rob sitting down watching that, going, "Who made this? This is interesting." And then, it's been great just to watch like Kate's rise and get to make a feature. And I absolutely loved You Are Not My Mother. And I just think she's going to go on to do like massive, massive things. So if you haven't watched You're Not My Mother, watch that.
No, that's on my
So,
list now. I literally just added this as you were telling me.
nice, excellent. Um, there is, I'll come into some more films in a second, but there's some other British filmmakers I want to say look out for. So there's a British director called Ethan Evans. He's just made short films for now, and he's made some TV in America, for Eli Roth. But over here, he's still yet to make a feature film. But I think he's 100% one to watch. He has amazing style. His taste in horror is great as well. So I think over the next like few years, again, Ethan Evans is one to watch. And his producing partner Jess is also awesome as well, and co-writer. So them, I would say, films to look out for, not just British ones. Um, there is if you want to watch more found footage, there is an amazing found footage film called Butterfly Kisses, which a lot of people haven't seen. But there's something special about that movie, and I could talk about like Lake Mungo, but a lot of people have seen Lake Mungo now because
Mhm.
when Host came out, me and Rob did a million different podcasts and interviews. We made sure we kind of name checked all of our favorite movies.
Yeah.
We mentioned Lake Mungo in every single thing, and then Lake Mungo got a really good release after that. We mentioned Ghostwatch a lot, and then Ghostwatch got a really good like release after that. And then so I'm hoping Butterfly Kisses gets some kind of revitalization in the eyes of the public
Well,
because
certainly Ghostwatch is there's so many people talking about it.
it's great.
I remember having the initial DVD release,
Hmm.
and it just unlocked all these memories that I'd completely forgotten about, and it was like,
Hmm.
wow. I didn't even realize that this was so impactful at the time
It's so
until
good.
you get
Yeah.
that kind of I don't know what it's hard to explain, but you get like a little feeling. You go, oh, I remember this, and it unlocks all these memories and little fears. Whether it's for some people, I suppose it's like certain episodes of Doctor Who or
Yeah.
something gross in a normally straight laced TV show. I think it was when that nearing the end of Ghostwatch,
Oh
when
yeah.
it all starts falling apart, and when you're at age, you think it's all real, and yeah, wow.
Yes. It's difficult to beat Ghostwatch when you first watch it
Mm,
because you're so disarmed by the fact there's a lot of British TV presenters that you grew up with. Like you just you inherently trust these British presenters and actors, and like
yeah.
Mike Smith and Sarah Green and Michael Parkinson, and
Yeah.
they tricked you. They pull the wool over your eyes.
Isn't it
Uh,
funny though? Isn't it funny though that that the people like you just wouldn't be able, wouldn't be able to do anything like that. Wouldn't be able to do that again. However, you watch a film like Host and you're able to believe that this is happening. You get lost in it. But then I think it was a couple of weeks ago, the Greg Wallace TV show on Channel 4 where it was about the harvesting of humans for meat. And
oh
he did it,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
he did it like the inside
Did it
the
straight.
factory, yeah, and he did it
Yep.
straight. And loads of people complained, and loads of people fell for it, and loads of people were like, "This is terrible. This is morally corrupt," and were really
Love it.
upset about it. And so I don't buy into that. It can't be done. I really believe
Yeah,
it
it,
can.
it
Yeah.
can. It can. On the BBC, that's a difficult one because BBC is a little bit. If it's Channel 4, you can kind of understand Channel 4 doing something,
Mm,
but BBC, it's difficult because that
yeah.
audience really trust the BBC and they don't want to mess with their integrity
I
sometimes.
think it's a bit like 3 by 3, the Inside Number 9, the Lee Mack quiz show one. I thought that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
real,
yeah.
just the bravery
Hmm.
for those two guys to not be in it.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Inside Number Nine, they play with like, and they did a kind of like a Ghostwatchy type live episode as well.
Mm.
So there's stuff out there that a little bit like Ghostwatch, but film wise, like yeah, just if you check, there's a director, the Japanese director Koji Shiraishi, who for the last like 25 years has been making amazing horror movies, a lot of found footage movies. People will know him for Noroi the Curse, which is probably from 2005, probably his most well-known one. But he made A Cult, which is incredible. He made one called Grotesque, which is great as well. Um, but the ones I like as well are the TV movies he makes in Japan, because he makes found footage TV movies. And
Hmm.
there's a series called Senritsu Kaiki Science. I'm gonna get this name. Senritsu Kaiki Kawasugu File 1 and File 2, File 3. It's a really long Japanese name, but just follow the director. So
Yeah.
basically, these were made about 10 years ago, and they follow each film a little bit like the Conjuring movies. They follow a team of investigators into the supernatural. And each film is a file, it's a different case, and one of them is the slit mouth woman from Japanese folklore. There's like a sighting of her, and they go with their cameras, fan footage style, and try and find her. There's one about a ghost that's seen in a school toilet, and there's what my favorite one is about um if people know Japanese folklore, there are these kind of monsters who live in the water, and these monsters, if they touch you, they could potentially turn you into one of them. Um, so yeah, so Koji Shiraishi, his movies, just watch any of them, and that they'll be satisfying. Another filmmaker people need to watch out for is this lady called Blair Bathory, who people might know her from just doing. She's very big on social media. She's like, her videos get millions of hits on like TikTok. Um, she's very savvy with horror and social media, but the stuff that she's up to in the next couple of years, well, in the next 6 months really, will really surprise people. And I know that just from being involved in some of that stuff.
Right.
Really, really interesting. And she's building a team of amazing people to help her do what she's trying to do. So keep an eye out for Blair Bathory. You won't miss her on social media. Go on TikTok, type in Blair Bathory. She goes around to spooky places filming herself.
Oh.
And her videos get millions of hits.
I'm so
So
old. I'm so old. I'm ridiculously old. I was just like, I'm probably just caught up to like Dead Malls. I'm like Dead Malls guy.
yeah, there's all that stuff. But
I had an idea for a movie in a dead mall. I like,
I
kind of
love all that
because
stuff.
there's so many people now wandering around places
Yeah.
and I find it so fascinating.
The production value you can get from like filming a short film in somewhere like that, it's almost worth breaking into
Mm.
for production value. But I could go forever. But there's so many amazing filmmakers out there, and especially in the UK as well. There's loads and loads and loads of really cool people.
Well, that's a really positive way to kind of sort of top and tail our interview, I think, isn't it? Because, you
Mhm.
know, I've started with a kind of quite a narrow view of what British horror is about and ones I've seen at film festivals and shorts. And
Mhm.
sometimes those people, I never see what happens to them. Now I have a
Yeah,
rough idea what has happened. And
yeah.
now I now kind of have an idea of, different creators to kind of enjoy. And honestly, if they're half as good as the films that I've watched that you've been involved with, then I'm going to really enjoy them. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Um,
Appreciate it.
no, thank you again for being so generous with your time. Um, and yeah, just best of luck in everything that you do. And I'm
Thanks,
really
man.
excited to hear about those things that were just kind of little teasers about the future.
Yeah,
So yeah, that'd be great. And again, I might ask you to come on and just tell me what films to watch. That would be
I'm up for it anytime, man. Anytime.
Oh, thank you so much.